welcome everybody to MAN471. My name is Roland and these are the slides I used when teaching fundamentals of project management at International Business School in Suzhou between 2017 and September 2019. Now this session on outsourcing was usually done by a guest lecturer. This is in fact the second time I am running this session on my own. So let's have a look what's going on. Outsourcing in project management means that for parts of the project, we are contracting an external party, a project management contractor, to complete a specific task in a specific manner within a certain budget and until a certain period of time has passed. We are basically trying to get someone to do our work. Why are we doing that? Especially if this is a project that is new to us, that is transformational, we want expertise because an expert can do it faster, potentially cheaper, and with a higher chance of success. Another option for us to outsource is when we do want to do a project, but we do not have the right kind of resources or resources are in short supply. Then we are looking for additional external resources, essentially. The problem with handing over work to somebody else is that you are handing control to somebody else. You are now dependent on somebody to do the thing that is in your interest. This can also be a risk, of course, when that person cannot deliver or when that organization, that PMC cannot deliver. It's also a security issue. A project that is innovative, you don't want others to know what you are doing. You don't want the outside world to know. You don't want competitors to find out and beat you to market. It can also be a significant cost issue. And so you need to balance the pros and cons when you are outsourcing projects or part of projects. This is one of the case studies from the Larson and Gray book. I will just leave this for you for a moment. I usually did a case study or two case studies with students and try to determine what is going right in these case studies, what is going wrong in these case studies. And what we are trying to do is coming to this kind of overview also from the Larson and Gray book, where we then identify two different approaches in how project outsourcing can happen. If you are approaching this in a partnering approach, then you need to have a mutual trust and shared goals and objectives. Then you can genuinely work together. You can also then create joint project teams. If you are communicating openly with each other, you avoid misdirection and increase the efficiency in the project. When you have outsourced parts of the project, you gain external expertise. You can see that risk and trust is a mutual issue. And when you go to the traditional approach, one of the kind of things that really struck me is that access to information is extremely limited with structured procedures, and essentially you are prioritizing knowledge retention over knowledge sharing and knowledge gain. When you're trying to push risk to the other party, whoever that is, whether it's the contractor or the organization that is actually outsourcing, if risk is not shared, then you are not able to develop, or very unlikely to develop, a longer relationship with that contractor. Now, what is important in these relationships is to have very clear specifications for every work package. Especially when parts of the project team are coming from outside, when you are outsourcing. You need extensive team building and training so that parts of the team understand each other. You need to have very well established conflict and conflict resolution procedures. You need to communicate openly, and not frequently, but at all times. You always need to be transparent and honest with each other. You need to have fair contracts, and you need to put people into the same location. If you are not aiming for long-term relationships, then all of this means nothing. This is basically very transactional and will not result in mutual trust, understanding, long-term relationships that are mutually beneficial. It will always be a one-off thing. And we need to understand that the world has moved on. Now I want to take a bit of time to look at the different contract types. There is 3 basic contracts that then split into multiple iterations of the same thing. The first thing I want to look at is, of course, the fixed price contracts. And the first version is that any kind of contract, any kind of cost increase in material and so on is borne by the contractor, which means you as the project management contractor need to understand what is the future price development or the potential for price increases, and you need to price that into your contract. However, this not only requires very precise specifications of every single work package, the contractor will also be refusing any kind of changes unless the buyer commissions and pays for them. In fixed price incentive fee contracts, you have some flexibility to deviate from the specifications depending on mutual agreement. The final price of everything is determined afterwards and depends on how the seller of the project, the contractor, is performing. That also then determines what kind of fee they are getting out of it. The final version of the fixed price contract is the fixed price with economic adjustment clauses. Now, this allows for longer term relationships because it protects both seller and buyer from massive cost changes. Now we need reliable indexes and we need reliable measurements and agreements in place to say, okay, the price of this has adjusted by this and this is how we are going to split the cost difference. Obviously, this can also result in cost reductions when prices are going down. So if you have a fixed price, you are then as a buyer in the position where you still have to pay the agreed price instead of the now cheaper cost of whatever product and service you have commissioned from the project management contractor. Now in cost plus fixed fee contracts is that you determine a fixed fee for the project management and execution service, and you are being reimbursed specific costs of very specific work packages. Now, in order to achieve performance, you can add an incentive fee. And the fee you are getting depends on how well you achieve certain criteria set in the contracts. And any kind of differences in cost are split according to a prior agreed formula. Cost plus award fee contracts see that the seller is reimbursed for the cost, but the fee they receive is based on subjective buyer satisfaction as defined in the contract, which can be a long negotiation out before there is any kind of mutual agreement. As always, caveat emptor, do read the contracts that you sign. T&A contracts, on the other hand, are hybrid contracts. The buyer and seller agree on a case-by-case basis on augmentation. Now this can happen ad hoc, this can happen a priori, this can be determined for a certain period of time, but the cost can go up significantly for the buyer. Especially here it is important to read the contract. All information to these different contract types can be found in the project management body of knowledge. I have taken the 6th edition when designing these slides together with the guest lecture. Now obviously we have different options, and the risk profile for you and the seller is different depending on what kind of contract you choose in your relationship. The question you need to ask yourself as the buyer, is this a plain transaction, or is this a repeat business I want to have with this project management contractor, with the seller? And depending on what your answer to this question is, you will select different kinds of contracts for every specific case. However, one of the things we need to bear in mind is that supplier integration and collaboration with project management contractors, suppliers, and so on is increasingly a strategic issue. One example, for example, is if you are selling mobile phones, you're producing mobile phones, you do not produce every single component, or in car manufacturing, you have so many suppliers for the lights, for the engine, for the electronics. There is so many things that are not coming from the seller of the car, whatever that seller's name is. And in fact, we have suppliers that are manufacturing for different kind of car manufacturers. What happens, or what tends to happen, is that you try to integrate the supply chain as much as possible, trying to internalize external things that technically are out of your control. However, this can also massively backfire. When you're, for example, producing screens for mobile phones, and the mobile phone manufacturer that you are supplying decides to change the specifications and move to another supplier, you essentially have no business. And this is what happened a couple of years back. Essentially, what you don't want to have is lock in with an unreliable partner. So again, this makes it a strategic issue and a strategic decision. Outsourcing becomes temporary insourcing. And as Sloan remarked in 2009, we are moving from control to collaboration. Thank you very much. See you next time.